Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Omar.
Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you can share with us?
Yeah, I was in high school in like kind of late 90s, early 2000s. So the whole Think Different campaign with Apple is a huge one. So I am, self-proclaimed Steve Jobs fan. I'm an Apple fanboy, if you want to call it. So, that campaign, if you remember back to it, the end line it is, the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are actually the ones that do. And to me, that's a super like a good reminder to be ambitious. Don't look for other people to do something. If you want something to change, the best way to do it, the best way to predict the future, best way to make the future is be the one going out there and trying to do it. And so I kind of try to live by that. I kind of try to, you want to be ambitious and not unrealistic or arrogant, but at the same time, you don't want to be under ambitious.
Yeah, totally. So tell us about PSPDFKit. What does the product do? Who is it for? And what's the main problem you're helping them solve?
Yeah. So I have to tell you, kind of early days, we were an iOS framework. Originally, it was just done because the iPhone had came out, the iOS SDK came out, and nobody could put a PDF viewer on it. So most people think like, well, doesn't Adobe do this? And no, they didn't. And so there was this need for companies that were putting a magazine app for a reader on the first iPad or things like this. And we kind of saw the niche. We built it. We built literally a magazine viewer with it and then kind of put it up on a store. And lo and behold, we found a need as the mobile kind of industry took off. Now, if you fast forward to kind of today, we went from just being this like mobile SDK developer tool provider to a much broader facet. We've bought a few companies. So we have everything from developer tools for the web, every major Java framework or JavaScript framework out there, to mobile, iOS, Android, hybrid frameworks, all the way to literally like server-side libraries to do, .NET batch processing of invoices, signing, viewing. If you go to our website and look at our list, you'll know a lot of the customers on our list that most people are surprised. We're kind of the unknown ingredient in a lot of these apps because there isn't a huge, massive open source community that solves these problems. They get you 80% of the way there, and then we kind of do the rest. And as we built that out, we have a workflow automation tool as well as, kind of integrations for IT administrators and things like Salesforce and SharePoint.
Like hearing you talk, you sound like, you could just be another tech founder from the Valley. And I think many people would be surprised to know that your background before you jumped in on this business, you were an attorney.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting story if you think about how I got into this business because so I started out in computer science at NC State. I was a gamer, still game to this day. Whether it's like turn-based strategy or first-person shooters, I still play Apex Legends, things like this. And so I love computers because I love gaming, I love competition there. And the first thing you run into is like, okay, well, I need to build a website for my clan. I need to, collect analytics, and I need to have a database to display them. And so then I went to school, and I quickly kind of realized like, hey, man, I don't want to be sitting behind a computer all day long. But I had 2 years of a CS degree. I pivoted to political science. I then, was very much adamant, like, okay, I need to go to grad school. I'm trying to raise a family, things like this. Law really appealed to me. I went to law school. I love law school. And I came out in 2009. It was like the worst period of time ever to come out of law school. Kind of like today is like, you're seeing people get laid off in the tech space. That was the legal field in 2009 or 2008, 2009. And so the iPhone SDK had just come out. My brother was at a government contracting agency, and he was a huge Apple fanboy way before it was cool to be an Apple fanboy. Like he was a Mac developer, like we're talking about a dinosaur here. And so he was starting a mobile agency and going to these conferences. And I kind of was like, hey, who's at these conferences? And I was just trying. I was literally working at Sears selling appliances, doing the exact same job I had in high school, living at my mother's house. I had 2 degrees and a license to practice law. So you can imagine the mind space I was in, and still I was like, I gotta find, gotta find a way to break through. I gotta make this a positive. So I started going to these conferences and went to because the attorneys that were showing up were all patent trolls. They're patent attorneys trying to get people to file patents for software. And a lot of these indie developers were essentially, I'm starting a business. I've never been a business owner. Now I got a contract in front of me, or I need to register a trademark, or I need to incorporate my business. And they, I just kind of was like, well, hey, I know about software. I can negotiate that contract. So I started getting talks about it. I kind of became known as the iPhone attorney guy. And I just started, building a practice in that space. And yeah, lo and behold, as my legal career went off and I started the litigation practice, I got to the point where I met Peter and I had an opportunity. Peter's my co-founder, Peter Steinberger. I had an opportunity where he was in a place where he became a client of mine. The company became a client of mine. And they basically he was like, hey man, I don't want to deal with all this stuff. Can you just do it? And it was kind of like, well, I can show you the doors. I can't open them for you. I'm your attorney. I'm not like, I can't make decisions for you. And so the early days that happened in 2008, 2009, the early kind of, sales career I had, the early kind of gaming career I had, all kind of came together beautifully for this opportunity when we started this business.
So I want to talk about how you kind of joined, because you didn't join at zero. You joined at 0.02. We'll talk about that. But before we get into that, give us a sense of the size of the business. Where are you today in terms of revenue, number of customers, size of team, so on?
Yeah, I won't give exact numbers on revenue, but I mean, I would say we're about a Series D. When I say that, I mean, we're in the multiple eight figures of revenue. We're still growing fairly rapidly. We've done some organic and inorganic growth. We bought a couple of companies. We're around 150 people. We're in about 27 different countries. Out of those, we're fully remote. So we have this bit where we were headquartered in Europe, in Vienna, Austria, and kind of headquartered out of Raleigh, North Carolina, because that's where Peter sat and that's where I sat. And our other business partner, Martin Schurler, was over there as well.
You guys have raised, I think, about 100 million euros to date, which is through private equity. But the really interesting thing about your business is, and I had no idea until you told me just a few minutes ago, was that you were bootstrapped until you guys were about 12 million in ARR.
Yeah, that's correct. I feel lucky. And so one of the things, I think it's very rare that you go down this path. I think it's very rare that you're in a market that you can survive going down this path. I mean, but we grew a sustainable business. We were profitable. I mean, very early, other than paying ourselves, we paid ourselves through the profits. But I mean, we didn't take on debt. Debt in Europe, debt especially in Germany and Germanic countries, it's kind of like a four-letter word, I like to say. Like they just don't do it. So we had to grow by getting the next customer and then thinking smartly about how are we going to invest this money back in the company? How are we going to grow? And how do we get in a place where we don't have to, hey man, we can't afford to pay you anymore. You're really great. You're really awesome. I just don't have the capital to do it. And we're lucky that we were able to do that. And yeah, the market changed in COVID. So we got interest along the way. We talked to about 4 to 5 companies, some of them very large strategics that people know, that wanted to buy us in the early days. But we kind of just wanted to continue doing what we were doing. And then you reach that 7-8 year mark. And I think, some people, they've run out of steam. They're ready for a break. You have burnout, and you're looking for a change. And COVID was super, super, like we already had a growing business. And then COVID was an accelerator of like remote hybrid work, which is essentially what we were helping companies do. And so it was a good time. Multiples were great in 21 as well. And so it kind of made sense to look for a raise. My 2 business partners wanted to exit, see how we could do that. And it kind of played out. And that was, 2.5 years ago. And we've had some rapid growth
So you talked about Peter being a client of yours, but at what point did you actually jump on board and actually become and be considered another co-founder in this business?
Yeah, so when I met Peter, it was just him running the business. He would pull in a part-time contractor if he needed like a design work or something like this. I think what the classic, you know, you try to, if you have money and you can get people that are better than you, that doing the things you're not good at, you try to do it, cheap. And if you can't, you do it yourself. And that was kind of where Peter was at. But Peter was very much an engineer. He was the technical founder. He enjoyed being in the code. That's what he wanted to do all day. And he met me, and I was kind of the business, sales, everything else person. I was at a law firm. I was on a partnership track. I was living with my in-laws. We were buying our first house, and my wife was pregnant with our first child.
The perfect time to join a startup.
It was a little crazy. But yeah, so we met. They became a client of mine, and that kind of gave me a good insight as to like what is going on here. What actually is here? Where do I think I could actually make an impact? Do I think I can scale this? Not just from, he just had a web store up, and there wasn't a lot of segmentation, and there was a lot of stuff for me that I kind of looked and said, I can add a lot to this if I get involved here. And he kind of got to a point where he was like, hey, I'm sick of dealing with the business side of it. I'm also ready to have a partner to kind of go on this journey with me, and let's start actually, investing this money. And I think we're large enough. And so, yeah, it worked out. He was a client of mine for 3 months. And then I decided, hey, let me come on at night for 3 months. Now I'll work at the law firm during the day. I'll work at night helping out. You're 4,500 miles away from me. Let's get to know each other. Let's see what we can do together. And if it works out, we'll do it. And about 3 weeks into that 3 months, it was clear. We got along very well. We complimented each other. We trusted each other. And we literally saw some really great returns in that first year of me joining, just in doing some structural changes to the business model.
You basically leapt off the cliff, right? You're in a really great job. You've got all of these things going on in your personal life. Sure, you can see this business, and you connect with a co-founder who you guys get, the two of you get on with each other, but the business is not doing a lot of money. It's like 20K MRR, and it's bootstrap. It's not like, yeah, we've just raised this ton of money and don't worry about it. You're good we got a 2-3 year runway or whatever. So it was a pretty big risk, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair to Peter, it was a pretty big risk what he gave up for me to come on as well. Like, he owned 100% of the business. So he had to incentivize me as well, and kind of, if this goes well. And I think if I hadn't joined at that time, I don't think the incentive I got and the outcome I got would have been there as well. So yeah, but the other side of it was you had to look at what I was doing personally. My brother was, could be anywhere. He had an internet connection in an airport because he was remote, and he was going to New York and consulting. I mean, he did mobile apps for Obamacare for America, did mobile apps for Whole Foods. It's like really big stuff. And here I had a license to practice in Virginia, and I had a license to practice in North Carolina. And that seemed really small towny to me. It wasn't ambitious enough. My family likes to say, my brother likes to say, you're kind of like a cat with 9 lives. Like, if you get thrown off the porch, you somehow land on your feet. And so I do have a high risk tolerance. But I also really saw like an opportunity in the business. I saw a vision in it. I mean, listen, I still see the vision in it, to be frank. And so why not back yourself? And to me, if you're going to start a startup, you got to have a little bit of that. Because if you don't, go get a job somewhere. Now, there's ways to like mitigate that. Like, I tell people all the time, it's the same way Peter started when he did it. He was waiting for his visa to go work in Silicon Valley, and he did a consulting job that he retained the IP to the framework that he built. And so like, if you can do this kind of part-time thing, it can kind of work, like work your nights and weekends to build your side project and try to do it. That's a great way to do it. But at some point you got a decision, like you got to go for broke, and you might fail and you got to get back up and go for broke again. And I would say the earlier you do it, the better. I mean, if I have 3 kids now, there's no way I would have been able to do it with 3 kids. Like, there's no way I'd have been able to take that risk.
So I think it was around 2014 that you joined. Is that right?
That's correct.
So 20K MRR, and then roughly how long did it take to get to the first million in ARR?
This is a good and bad story. It probably took us from 250K around 8 months to get to $1 million.
All right, let's unpack that. Like, what you obviously did something, or at least that change happened, or the trajectory changed when you joined the business and teamed up with Peter. What did you do? Let's talk about those first couple of months. What did you start doing to drive growth, and how did you figure out where to focus?
The first thing I did was, we had a web store, we had a product-led growth strategy, where people came to it, and then we literally had this one, what the common contact us is now, and it was, if your company is behind a paywall, or you have a login, contact us and you need a different license. And we weren't on a subscription. And you got to remember, 2014, there was no such thing. Like, Adobe had just gone to subscriptions. And so I kind of looked and said, A, we're going to go to subscriptions. And there are customers that, canceled. We're done. B, I looked and said, we're going to take down this one-stop pricing. And this worked for our business, because you got to understand, we had large companies like a Dropbox that was contacting us to do this for file previewing. And then we had, I don't know, the college student trying to get their mobile app, or the indie developer trying to get their mobile app. Well, I couldn't charge that same price to both. I'm providing a different value to each. So I early on became the first salesperson, and you charge different prices. So instead of charging, I don't know, 5, whatever, even if it's like a per user thing, 15 per user, go bespoke. And I think a lot of these small SaaS startups, because they're technically, they're technical founded, a lot of technical founders are allergic to that. They don't like, I want transparent pricing up front, and you're facetious, or you're doing something dirty if you don't have that.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Jonathan, your target customer at the time in that first year, was that primarily iOS developers?
Yes. And this was a space where both me and Peter kind of came from.
Right. And so what was the model that developers were used to in terms of licensing these types of, kits?
So with each app store, there's something called a bundle ID. It's a reverse URL. I'd like to call it like an address. So whatever your address is for your app. So at the time, like, if you had one app on the main public store and then you had an app in an enterprise store, those were 2 separate apps, right? And unlike, Android, there was no sidecarding. So like, it wasn't like you were able to load an instance of another app in another app. So we quickly went to, per app, like it was a per app basis. But we were also pretty flexible on the business model. This was another thing I changed. So like, some early customers that were just starting up, we would take a revenue share, and essentially we wouldn't get paid that much. But then over periods of time, it scaled like crazy, and those became great deals for us. So we kind of charade not just like one metric, but like, I don't know, any metric you can think of that worked to close the deal. We're kind of, we've been dealing with the cleanup of that basically since. But in the early days, that is very true. You kind of do the best deal that gets the customer up and running. That is kind of the win-win for your business and win-win for your customer. And so that was kind of what we did. And yeah, in the iOS space, the good thing about it in those early mobile days is you had indie developers. It was growing, very rapidly growing. And you had some really large corporations that were just trying to figure out how to have a mobile presence. And so the horizontalness of the framework, I mean, we're like digital paper if you think about it, is huge. And so we were in a lot of different industries pretty early on, um, and a lot of different use cases. And some of those were large deals and some of those were, you know, tiny deals. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's a broad demand. You switch to a subscription model for licensing your kit.
Per year, actually, even paid up front per year, not even monthly.
So that's one thing. You're effectively, hopefully, increasing revenue there. But what were you doing to acquire more customers?
Yeah, and this is I like to talk about like one of the things that I think early days when you're the first two or three people at a company, you have multiple jobs. You got to do everything. There is no, and I mean, every founder knows this. They feel it. They like now. Some people choose not to do some stuff. One of the things that we had really well in our, my three co-founders, or the two other co-founders, and myself, is like we would talk about what we were doing. We would like literally every single day, right on Twitter. That was how we recruited. So it was like we needed people to know about us if we wanted to get talent. We needed people to know about us so that they knew what our product was. We talked at conferences because we were already connected to the conference scene. So we would talk about what we were doing before we give a conference talk. And then the thing I think that was really interesting was that the type of content that we were producing, there's kind of two things I believe in, but one is like people want helpful content. Help them out with something. So I just told you a piece of content that sends, I don't know, 13,000 people a month to our website. What is a bundle ID? It has nothing to do with PDFs or documents or anything like this. It literally just, if you're in the iOS space, people Google, I don't know what a bundle ID, and they find a blog post we wrote about it. We wrote about it in like 2015 or something like that. So we just started producing content, all of us. Peter, literally Peter wrote almost like a blog about a problem he ran into, swizzling, doing that, like, things that were really pertinent that were catnip for an iOS developer. And so what was crazy is like, 3 years later, we went to DubDub, Apple's developers conference, and you would be in a line waiting to go into the keynote. And I bet every other developer there knew who we were. They knew who our company was by our T-shirt. And listen, our company's name is PSPDFKit. Like, it's not this beautifully named a company, but so people knew it because they had read our blog and they had found something interesting, or they had followed Peter on Twitter, or they had saw a conference I was at. And so I think that just giving back to the community, giving back to where your ICP is, and especially in developer marketing, and genuinely doing that, like not fake doing it, really, really buys you a lot of credibility. It buys you a lot of awareness. It buys you a lot of referrals. It also helps you with SEO because if people are reading it and searching for things, well, now when you put out something pertinent to your space, well, all of a sudden your domain authority at Google's, huge because you have all these people visiting your website and spending 3 minutes to 5 minutes to visit on your website reading an article. So it kind of worked both ways.
Yeah, totally. So going from the 250K in ARR to basically 4xing that to getting to the first million, you said 8 months. And then, so what I heard was you changed basically the business model and how you were pricing the product to you started, or all of you were writing content and publishing and trying to get index and generate more organic search traffic. And then thirdly, you guys were building basically in public. You were using Twitter and just trying to raise visibility of what you guys were doing as founders and how you were going about building this business. Were those the three main things that drove the growth and helped you get to the?
Yeah, and the fourth one I'd put in there, and you're going to get some bias from me because I'm from the business side of the business, right? Don't get me wrong, I was heavily involved in the product direction, but think the other thing we did was when we built something new that we knew was of value to a customer, a current customer of ours, did we just include it or did we charge them for it? So you have to create this segmentation, and it can't be, I don't know, tiny little improvement. I'm going to charge you for it, or your customer will hate you. But if you do something major to the business, like, I don't know, everybody's adding AI functionality right now. You're adding like AI functionality to your product, charge your customers for that extra, like segment it out, premium price it. So that also led to this, like, what now people call customer success and this whole sort of like internal growth. Your customers, like, we created and our customers were happy to pay us more money because we were this small startup. They relied on us and we were providing more value to them. And they just wanted us to see us survive because they were banking and building some functionality in their apps that they needed to exist for 5 or 10 years down the road. So it kind of, those things all kind of collectively led. And then of course, like, this isn't the fifth thing. This is definitely later on. This is when you start thinking about, okay, well, so we have this iOS product coming. What's next? And you need to have money. You need to have the business model down to be able to invest in the next thing that's going to grow the business. And so I like to tell people, a lot of people don't think about innovation and business model. It's like the last place everything's innovation and technology. And if you look at some of the largest businesses in the world, the iPod, what was the big thing with the iPod? 99-cent songs, innovation, and the business model. I think that's true strategy. And what I've seen, even when I was an attorney, or even now, I've seen a ton of phenomenal products solving really difficult problems that plateaued or didn't get to revenue growth because they just didn't have the business model right, or they weren't marketing themselves, they weren't telling their story. I see those way more than I see shitty products, if that makes any sense.
Did you do any outbound, any cold email in the early days to try and acquire customers?
I would say we probably did it around 800 to 1 million. We started, hey, why don't we try to do this? And we saw, try to think, well, like, let's try to do this. I think for the SDK business, the complexity of our sell. I mean, like I tell people all the time, it's kind of like a 4-part sell. Like first, you gotta convince the person they need to build off a PDF, right? Because there's other ways to build. Then you gotta convince them, like, open source out there isn't going to solve your problem. You're going to run into issues. Well, they're going to want to figure that out. Then you're going to convince them, hey, there's other, competitors in this market, but we're the best one for your need. And then the fourth one is, oh, hey, by the way, we're not charging small prices. It's a premium price product. That's a really difficult sell to do outbound, especially when we're not looking at 2-year we were trying to survive. We weren't trying to look at 2-year, sales cycles, which oftentimes outbound sales cycles, unless you have a product that you can immediately identify the need and you can come in, sell it quickly. It's not a complex thing. There isn't a lot of competition for it. That's where outbound works very well. And it just didn't work for us. We never saw the ROI for it, to be frank.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But I would say equally with content marketing, SEO, you have some challenges there as well. I mean, yes, you can reach people who are, talking about the funnel, problem aware, they're solution aware, so they're more closer to being convinced to that buying decision. But you also have this problem that if you're publishing content, it may not drive any organic search traffic for 6 months, 12 months, right? So how did that work out for you guys?
I mean, the big thing that I think it was harder for us, and when we released our Android framework a little bit later, because we weren't knee deep in the Android market. And then when we released our web framework in 2017, and it was like, what we did on the web framework, I mean, each one of these times, it's like recreating a company almost. We were first on WebAssembly pretty early. WebAssembly is basically like a technology to be able to run backend processes in the browser client side. And a lot of people weren't really sure whether it was actually ready for production when we started using it. And we knew early on, we kind of made a bet, we're going to be there. Well, so we created a website called Is WebAssembly Fast Yet? And it was a benchmark where you could literally run your things through WebAssembly and it would show you what it'd do on different browsers. We got on Hacker News, where our audience is. We told them about this. We promoted it. And then all of a sudden people started going to it. And then lo and behold, one of the major, browsers, I think it might have been Chrome, reached out to us and said, hey, we want to use your browser to benchmark Chrome. Holy shit. Well, then all of a sudden Safari reached out to us. Hey, we want to use your browser to benchmark Safari off of it. That alone, like those type of, and the example I'm trying to give is if you can think of something that is important to your customer base, where they're at, where are they hanging out, where are they at? I don't like, in today's world, maybe it's Reddit, or maybe it's Stack Overflow, maybe it's some forum. You got to find where they're at. You got to define who your ICP is. You got to find out where they're at. Become part of that community. That's the thing that I think is really hard is when you have founders or people that are trying to solve a problem and they're not involved in that community at all. They don't know the community. They're just trying to sell to that community. You're gonna be, putting out content and it's not gonna mean anything. So I think the more you know that ICP, the more you understand what they value, the day-to-day problem they're going in. This is why so many problems, so many businesses that are started on problems that people have that they solve for themselves work out so well because you are that ICP. So the more you know that ICP, then find out where they're at, then try to write compelling content. One of the things is like people always have writer's block and say, I don't know what to write about. I think what people don't realize is look at the way people consume content online. Half of the things they want to know is who is Jonathan Rhyne? What does Jonathan Rhyne do all day? What does a day in Jonathan Rhyne's life look like? Everybody cares when they're interested in a company or interested in this. They care about what do you like? Who are you like? What's it around it? What are you doing? Just write about your day. And yeah, it's a habit. It's a muscle. Examples I like to give is like, Bruce Springsteen. Everybody knows Bruce Springsteen, this artist or whatever. What they don't realize is how many songs he produced. Picasso, I think it was like the whole joke of Picasso throwing away the napkin and the lady going, oh, don't throw that away, give it to me. And he said, okay, that's, 20 grand. How can a napkin be worth 20 grand? And he goes, well, you just did it in, 5 minutes. He goes, I didn't do that in 5 minutes. I did it in 50 years or whatever. That's the thing. You don't know what's going to catch. So you got to just kind of do these. Don't make them huge bets. Do as many small little bets, many small little tests. Brute force the problem, brute hack it, and you'll start to see stuff that works. But I think the first thing, going back to what you're saying, is like you got to know your ICP very well, know what they value, know where they're at, engage them. I don't want to say it's that simple, but it is that simple.
So with that example you gave about, how you spend your day, where were you publishing this? Would you publish it as a blog post? Would you share it on Twitter or you tweet about it? Like what was the
combination of both? Talk about it on Twitter. We publish it. One of the first thing I did was Peter was writing a lot on his own personal petersteinberger.com type website, like everybody does. Most people separate their personal brand from their startup brand because they want to write about these things that matter to them here, and they don't want to dilute it over here. And I told him, no, stop it. Like, you can be the personal brand. We are the personal brand. Talk about it on PSPDFKit. That's who we are. Maybe it isn't about the product we're doing. Maybe everyone doesn't want to read it, but there will be people that will go, I don't know, like, cool, he has a really good, office desk. And what monitors does he like, or what tools does he use? And they care about that stuff, even though they may not be buying the product that you're doing. But when somebody comes to them and says, hey, I have this document problem, blah, 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 they'll go, hey, man, I know this really cool guy. He has a really cool office setup. And by the way, I think he might sell a PDF SDK. You should just check it out. And that is the magic. That's the magic of what you need to get started. That's the little tiny spark you need.
So in many ways, yeah, you were creating content for your target customer, your ICP, but you were also just sharing just life, like what you were up to, what you cared about, what you were interested in with the world. And in many ways, it just, even if they weren't your target customers, they were people who were able to build some kind of connection with you and remembered you had some PDF thing.
I mean, the thing is, I don't know which article or which tweet or which conversation I had on a coffee break at a conference led to them telling someone else about it. So I just do all of them. And it became a habit. And LinkedIn now is this. I mean, like, tell anybody that's on LinkedIn, this is all LinkedIn now. Like that, and it's very noisy. Twitter's, I mean, disastrous now, but like Twitter wasn't like this before. You could find, I mean, the reason we were on Twitter is because the iOS dev community was on Twitter then. And so like that's where our audience group was, right? And so, yeah, I think that, these people were all throughout the US and Europe, and that was our water cooler. So they also wanted to know who you were, at the water cooler.
Cool. So we've talked a little bit about growth and just generally in terms of like getting to that first million and some of the things you were doing around content marketing and SEO and so on. Let's talk about a little bit about the product side. And in those early days, it was great. I mean, you were attracting these people. The business is starting to grow fairly quickly. But then you've also got this problem where you're getting all kinds of random requests for things that seem super important, that seem like features that are going to move the needle with growing revenue even more and faster. And you guys were trying to respond to every request that was coming in. But as you learn the hard way, it wasn't always the best way to invest your time.
The treadmill until you get to product market fit, or you can afford to say no to customers. This is one of the probably hardest things, because normally when people get into a business and they do it, they have a vision. They have it's their baby. We want to do this. We start getting customers, and the customers start telling you what your baby needs to look like, what clothes you need to dress it in, and, needs this or needs that. And they're pushing what they need, right? Or they're pushing the extra thing. And software is, I think all software, the beauty of SaaS is, can I take something that everybody wants their own Ferrari, and can I make it into a sedan for at least most of the people, or a van, or whatever it is. And then people ultimately then want you to like, yeah, but I want the van that drives as fast as a Ferrari. And they start then trying to push you back into customization. And this is a rat race, especially when you need revenue, because some of those customers I can't say no to. And some of those customers, like, I don't know, they're threatening to churn if I don't do it. They'll go somewhere else. Yet I have, a small engineering group that didn't join just to erratically do the next fire. And I mean, really, it became firefighting. Like, what's the issue of today that the customer's going to scream the loudest that we need to do right now and get it fucking done? And I think it takes both guts. There's nuance that you need to kind of balance the two. You got to get to a point where you can say, I'm going to time about two weeks where I tell the customer, sorry, it's not going to happen until later. So you can work on the things that you think your vision of the product and where it should go. The other thing is like the tech debt this does. I mean, if you do it long enough, you'll freeze. Like you'll have something that's so fragile, you'll have to start from scratch again. And then it's the death nail to a SaaS business, because if you start losing customers quickly, they don't come back, right? You get a reputation of, I use that product, but it's so fucking buggy, So like, you got to keep up quality, right? But it was really hard.
You said one thing to me that you said the impact was good short term for the business and bad long term for the business. Can you give maybe an example or two of what you mean by that?
Let's say a customer comes, they need you to do some customization. It wasn't on your roadmap, but they're willing to pay your largest deal to date. Cool, we're going to do it. Let's do it. Get it done. 2 weeks, go at it. You sprint and you do it. you get that money. It feels great, especially in the early days. I mean, one of the pieces of advice I'll tell people in the first million is remember how excited you got when you got what your largest deal was then. Because if you are successful, you miss how excited you got when those deals came in. And so the thing is, you're excited about it at that moment, you know? But then you set the expectation with the customer that, if they say jump, you'll say how high. And they don't care how much money you spent. And then when you say, well, but if you want me to jump that high again, I need you to pay me more money. And they go, but I paid you so much money. No, jump again, jump again. And then you have the next deal that now is 2 times that largest deal. And they're saying, hey, jump. I got this thing I need you to do. But you're still jumping for the one that was half the size of it. And you don't know how to juggle the two. So what's really hard is that's a tough conversation that should happen at the beginning. Should happen midway through. Like anything, sometimes setting expectations early is better than having to come back and set expectations later. The other thing is, a lot of times the way when you're a small, you're small, you're going out, you're thinking, man, this is so important to me. It must be so important to the customer. I have to do it. Well, maybe you don't have to do it. Maybe they don't need it. Maybe you just ask them, like, when would you need this done? Well, actually, can you get this done in a year? Oh, shit, I thought you wanted it in 2 weeks. Yeah, cool. Well, let's put that on the roadmap. But if you never ask that question, you're sprinting to do it in 2 weeks. And then when you do it, they go, wow, you did that so fast. Let's see what else we can throw at you. And it's like, again, short-term revenue gain, short-term excitement because you closed the deal. Long-term, you're losing control of that roadmap. You're losing control of product. And you're setting yourself up for bad, like, could really piss off that customer if you set an example so far and now all of a sudden it's different. And then that large deal churns because they view you as a consulting company, not as a SaaS business. That's especially with large customers. In early days, you get a big customer coming. Sometimes it's worse than if they didn't come.
Yeah, so I think that's great advice. I think for many founders who are in that situation, in an ideal world, if you had product market fit and you were getting great traction, you could say no to a bunch of things that just feel off strategy. In those early days, it's really hard. And the key, from what I heard from you, was being able to set expectations with customers, so you're not always seen as, the guys who will jump whenever they command it. And in order to get there, you need to get better at asking questions and not making assumptions. And what you said about, when they need it is one example of that. Others, I think, could be, what exactly is it that you think this is going to solve? And is there a different way that we could help you solve that now without going off and building a new feature?
Yeah, exactly. And part of that, one of the reasons I do think this idea of you need to have a relationship with your customers early on. This is a hard thing with product-led growth strategies. They're great, but then immediately you need to start talking to those people, because otherwise they start talking at you through support and you don't have a relationship with them to have sort of a partnership discussion where they understand you're trying to build a product in a direction and you understand why they value your product and what they're using it for. That's super important.
So the first million, 8 months. What was the next big milestone for you, and how long did it take to get there?
Yeah, 5 million probably was a big milestone. It probably took us 3 to 4 years. I'm trying to think. It would have been 2015. We got to 1 million, and it would have probably been entering 2018. So maybe 3 to 4 years that it took us to get to 5. And then, from 2018 to 21 to get from 5 to 12. And yeah, a couple things changed. We tried a lot of new products. We started, if you knew the graveyard, I mean, we're not Google, but it's almost as bad. Or we didn't know what are we? We built a framework. So are we a framework company? Are we a PDF company? Are we just, let's build a product, and if we can put it out there and people will give us money for it, we'll be any one of these things and have a bunch of little small businesses. We didn't really have a strategy or like a coherent strategy there.
So what kind of products were you building alongside what you already had?
We had a perfect example. One of the first projects we released was called Watchtower. It never Control Tower, sorry. And it was literally a licensing tool because we built our own internal licensing tool to license our products. And so it kind of became like a lightweight CRM. We had a customer database in there. We invoiced our customers through it. We gave out licenses and we tracked those licenses in it. So we said, well, other companies that are building products need something like this. So let's put it out there. We put out a website. We had an ability for somebody to kind of like, call us if they needed, and crickets. And it was like, okay, yeah. And then the worst thing is you get one person that's interested. And it's like, oh God, am I only going to sell this to one person? We tried a end user product that we called DocFlow, that it was kind of this idea. We had a customer in Europe that they were doing, they were sending these people out to factories to do maintenance of these robotic doors. And we thought, okay, this is kind of like people in the field, and then you have a central base. So we created an app. We'll give the central base a viewpoint of everything, get all their documents in order, and create a client-side app for a mobile device for the person in the field. And we worked with the customer. They loved it. We had 2 or 3 other people who got interested in different places, started to work on it. And then it was like, but we didn't have a self-service model for them to set up. So we had it literally was us starting a whole nother business while we were focusing on the thing that was actually making us money.
So why did you guys do that? Why you've got one business which grew fairly quickly to the first 7 figures, and then it seems like you've got focus, clarity, where you need to take this, and then suddenly you've got all of these other products, this little cottage industry that you're building with these different things going on. And often when I see that with founders in the early stages, the question for me always is like, do you not believe that this first product can be something bigger? And are you trying to, hedge your bets and try to do a bunch of different things? Like, how did you guys end up in that situation?
And this goes back to the difference between a mom and pop viewpoint of a business versus like a growing, investor-led company. I think a mom and pop, I don't know, you've been to a nice restaurant, maybe they have 2 restaurants, and you're sitting there going, God, you guys should be all over America. This is phenomenal. And they're going like, these 2 restaurants, to get them up and running, they create a good lifestyle for us. We get to go do this, we get some money, and why don't we try to not get over our skis, right? So we kind of had that view, and the other thing was so if you think about it, if you go from 2013 to, essentially 2018, that's 5 years. And it's you get well, let's try something else. Let's do something again. And the thing we did, I think we weren't sure of the size of the TAM at the moment. What people don't remember is digital transformation has been a thing that's been going on forever. It just is the thing that was always on everybody's 5-year roadmap. It was just always on the 5-year roadmap. It wasn't until COVID that it was like, oh shit, that we needed to have that yesterday. And so it was kind of steady growth, but not rocket ship growth. And so here we are, arrogant founders. We grew business. Let's go for something that grows even faster and, have rocket ship growth. And it was distracting, but it was fun. We got excited by it. It was shots in the arms of motivation. It was cool to see the products we put out. We learned from it for sure. But we were also still growing the other business kind of sustainably as well. But I think one of the big things people don't realize, what's the difference between a mom and pop business and an investor-led business is an investor-led business, you're not taking capital out of the company at the end of the year. Now, they're always focused. If anything, you're building cash in the company, or you're looking, how can we spend that money? The classic VC question is, if I give you $10 million or $1 million, how can you 10x your business? I mean, that's a really big question for people that are just bootstrapped a company. Whereas when you bootstrap a business and you're seeing your income go up, man, you want to see that income go up. You're getting comfortable. Your lifestyle is growing a little bit. And so you're more conservative with that investment. Um, and so I think that was one of the reasons we did it. Uh, some of it also was, I mean, I can tell you in 2015, I wanted to go to the web, but my WebAssembly wasn't around. My technical founders were kind of like, yeah, we're not going to, that's going to take us 5 years and we need this many people to do it. And so we just never considered it. It wasn't until later that I just said, cool, like, can you just spend a month and research this and see what's possible? And all of a sudden, lo and behold, hey, I think we found a breakthrough because we have phenomenal engineers that figured it out. So some of that was just timing.
So you bootstrapped through to 12 million in ARR once you got the focus back and continued growing this business. And then you raised the private equity money. At that time, your two co-founders decided that they were going to cash out, and so you're the one guy left now. And it's not a bootstrap business anymore. It's become that investor-driven business, and you don't have your co-founders. How did life change for you?
One thing I'll say, and this is not me, like Insight Partners out of New York City is my investor. I was lucky that I literally talked to just about every VC, PE, like in the similar sizes they are. And I got to choose who I ultimately went with. And they're a phenomenal investor. They're very founder friendly. They're very growth oriented, even even in today's market and what's happened in tech and SaaS. But it was a big change. Some of it was, I mean, like you have to think for the majority of my time at this company, I viewed it as not my company. It's our company. I use that word. It's me and my three business partners. I still call them my business partners, even though they're not. And that changed. So now it's like, oh man, this is Jonathan's company. Well, that's different. Um, it was a really big education in that first year. You got to be able to, a good, I would say investor-led leader of a company, whether they're the founder or the CEO, you got to talk two different languages because you're the operator. You know what needs to get done to actually execute the plan. And investors are not operators, they're investors. They're looking at numbers, metrics, and they expect you to tell them what the number and metrics will be and then go figure out how to do it. And it's easy, I think, in the operator seat to go, oh, those damn investors, they don't know shit about running a business. And I know people that do that, and you'll quickly find out you'll be out of a job because they'll find somebody that understands both. And so you kind of get both. Like they have pattern recognition. I mean, they have 700 companies in their portfolio, so they're seeing a larger range. They have operating leaders and groups. But the other thing was I had a boss. Like that's weird. One of the things people love about becoming a bootstrap founder is I don't have a boss, right? I'm my own boss. And now I had a board. And then really what I found out with is, yeah, I have a boss, but they're looking to me still to tell them what to do. They're backing me. So it's not really a similar like, hey, what do you think I should do type relationship? It's I think we should do this. What do you all think? And then they look at you and they're like, all right, well, we're okay with you doing that. We're going to look and want to make sure you achieve X, Y, and Z. And so it creates, I think, a really healthy bit of accountability because it removes this, I'm going to go do this other product that's not in focus with what I'm doing. No, focus on damn core business that's making money. And I think sometimes founders become bad business people because either they think they're invincible and everything they can do, they can do successfully, or they get distracted, or they don't like the word accountability or ownership. They kind of like, well, whether I have a good year or a bad year, I own this thing and I'm cool and I'm there. And that's just not the real world when it comes to, what an investor is. Investors they're giving you money to grow it, to return money to their shareholders or their LPs. but it was different. It was absolutely different. I had a little bit of anxiety around it, to be frank, and it was good change for me. It wasn't bad change. Um, but yeah, it was. The other thing was like we grew so fast. We went from 50 people in 2021 to 100 people, basically by midway through 2022. Beginning of 2023. So in over a year, we doubled in size of people. And the thing I loved about the smaller business was like, man, like I'm not the CEO, I'm Jonathan. I'm sitting here right next to you, hacking away, trying to get this thing done. We're a family. We're trying to survive. We're in it together. And then when you scale, it kind of becomes like, I mean, I'm running a business. These are my employees, and not even so much that I view them that way, but when I walk in a room, it's so shit. Everybody gets quiet. The big boss just walked in, and yet I don't feel like the big boss, and I don't want to be the big boss. So, yeah, there's definitely things that change.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating journey and kind of going back to the, jumping off the cliff and joining this little startup doing 20K MRR to, where it is today. It's amazing. I'd love to keep the conversation going, but we should wrap up and get on to the lightning round. So I've got 7 quick fire questions for you. You ready?
Yes, go ahead.
What's one of the best pieces of business advice you've received?
The best way to answer this is to say, you know, the bad one I have is make your customer, if a customer values something, they'll tell you by paying you for it. So make people pay you for things they value.
I love that. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
I mean, I have 3. I'm a huge reader, so I could probably give you a list till we're blue in the face. I really like The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. I think it just really solves some of the like people issues as you scale up. Some of the really hard things that you don't anticipate when you're first starting out. I also read this book, Scaling Up, How a Few Companies Make It and Why the Rest Don't. It's a good collection of a lot of books that I think are good. When you start thinking about what are our core values, why do I need to do this, what's a BHAG, things like this. I think 0 to 1 is a classic. It's a really fascinating book. It also hits at really what it's like to really live that journey and some of those lessons that everyone goes through. So, sorry, classic books, but
what's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
I go with this, the original quote I told you with Steve Jobs, but you got to believe you're going to be successful. And what I mean by that is like, because if you don't think you're going to be successful, you're not going to be willing to do what you need to do in the moments where you're not sure whether you're going to be successful that will ultimately make you successful. So if you don't have self-belief, you might as well stop because you're not going to make it. You're not going to have the energy. You're not going to get through the lows. So to me, it's like really core that you got to have self-belief. You gotta something in you's got to believe I'm just going to make this work. So that to me, whether they call it grit, I'm sure there's a million ways they call it, but that's a belief would be the way I'd put it.
What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Yeah, I'm ADD, ADHD, like diagnosed ADHD. So when I was trying to do focus work, it hurts me. But when I'm trying to do context switching and a lot of different jobs, it's actually kind of a superpower. So I'm not one of these people that I have this system. But one of the things I've really done since law school is like, when you're enthusiastic and you're motivated and you're in the flow and you're having a really good time working on something, do whatever you can to stay, stretch that time. Don't get up. And then the other one, and probably the key one that I think a lot of people don't think is like, people have bad days. If you have a day and you're not productive, get the hell up. Go do something else. Go walk. Go do something you enjoy. I don't know. Read a book. Watch a television show. The last thing you need to do is sit at the damn computer and try to bang something out while you hate it and you're not doing good work. Because by you getting up and going to do something else, you'll find you break it up and you might then return to it, be motivated and get in the flow state. So I really focus on those energy levels and I don't try to make it fit into like a perfect circle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think I'm you. I'm like you. I haven't been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have ADHD and struggle a lot with focus. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that when you're having those tough moments, the harder you try, the worse it gets. right? And to be able to walk away and just do something else until you can re-energize yourself, you're going to come back and you might even have the solution to whatever it was you were struggling with. So I think that's great. What's a new or crazy business idea you'd love to pursue if you had the time?
I joke, there's a really bad joke I have with my family. There's a thing called a grill mirror. And I always thought, like, if you want the perfect grill marks on the bottom side of your, steak or burger, you can imagine this little dentist thing that goes in and it shows that, okay, they're even. So then I flip it and even. And I say, that's my $1 million idea. Mothers will buy them for their son-in-laws with their favorite sports team on them or whatever. Oh, that's a jokey one. Obviously, I have 3 children, young children. I really care about climate change. It's kind of one of the good side effects of our business is, we really do. We plant trees we planted 10 trees per customer last year. I've always thought of like a mint.com for climate change. The idea that if you could then build this tracking system, and I know there's things that try, but like the thing that mint.com does was it listed everything, and then you could apply the score, and then you could show like, hey, this is my personal impact on climate change. And then if you got the government involved, which I think they will get involved at some point, you can get like, hey, propose to the government, get tax subsidies for people that do this. If you have a good climate record, you get a tax subsidy. If you have a bad climate record, you got to pay more extra money or something like this. I don't know, crazy idea. I don't know if it ever commercially would work. Other than that, like, I love stock trading and forex trading. So your part of me thought about just starting a hedge fund, to be frank.
What's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I guess you pulled out the one that I would kind of say, like I was an attorney, and most people don't think of a startup founder, let alone a business, as an attorney.
And finally, what's one of your most important passions outside of your work?
Yeah, so I've talked about I have a wife and 3 young children. My daughter's turning 10, my son's 7, my youngest is almost 4. So obviously dad time takes up a lot of stuff when I'm not here. I love soccer. I play soccer. I watch the EPL. I'm a huge Arsenal fan, so go Gunners. And then I like golf. I mean, I know these things sound typical, but golf is a perfect sport that is so frustrating to play, and you're competing against yourselves, but it's a mental grind. And I think one of the people, like personalities like us that get into entrepreneurship, we like challenges. We want to continue to push ourselves, continue to improve. So golf to me scratches that itch in a non-work related setting. But yeah, I would also tell you, just last thing with this, I'm not a big believer maybe in this whole like work-life balance type thing. And part of the reason I say that is I like to tell people, I went to law school because I wanted to be a good father. I pick myself up away from the computer because I want to be a good father and I want to have my kids. I go play soccer and do golf because I have to manage my anxiety levels, or I want to be healthy, or otherwise I would sit at the computer all day long and it wouldn't be forced. I love my job. I'm living the dream. It's one of the best job I've ever had. I've had a lot of jobs. So
that's a long way away from the days when you were working in Sears.
Sold cars. I've worked in politics. I've done all the jobs everyone hates.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your journey of building this business. If people want to check out the SDK, they can go to PSPDFKit.com. And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, hit me up on Twitter. It's JDRHYNE is the handle. That's probably the easiest way, or message me on LinkedIn. But I still check Twitter. I'm on Threads as well. Same handle on Threads. So yeah. And Omer, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was an honor to speak with you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I wish you and the team the best of success.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.